Welcome, everyone. You are listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorilee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network and anywhere you get your podcast. Today's guest is Scott Grace, author of Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. Scott is a life coach, tapping wizard, intuitive guide, mentor, inspirational speaker, singer-songwriter, conscious comedian, and the author of 4 books, including Mindful Masculinity, which we will discuss today. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I love
Well,
it.
I mean, so mindful masculinity, I love that title. We do hear a lot about toxic masculinity, and I'm assuming this is just the opposite of that. Could you tell me what mindful masculinity is?
Sure. Well, it's non-toxic masculinity, 100% organic, gluten-free. Uh, it's masculinity without the cultural conditioning of the taboo that men face around is being a sissy if they're afraid or if they're crying. There's a lot of taboos. There's a lot of rules about being a man. And when you strip them away, there's just the authentic energy of masculinity, which could look very different for each man. So there's no rules about what mindful masculinity is about. The word mindful does imply that there's an awareness. There is an observer looking within, curious. Where did this arise from? Is this my authenticity, or is this another rule, another layer of society's programming? So maybe
Mm,
mindful masculinity is just the quest and the practice of discovering who we are as men and discovering who we are not, that
yeah.
we've been playing by the rules of an insane culture.
Whatever that may be, right? And
Mhm.
that and you said culture, right? Like cuz I mean, I don't know. I live in Washington DC. It's very very progressive here. Um and I don't see a lot of toxic masculinity. I don't see a lot, it's authenticity is very important. Maybe that's the bubble I'm in and the people I surround myself with. But
You obviously don't visit Congress.
no, no, no. I'm literally less than a mile away from Congress, but in the community of Washington D.C. because they don't live here. So for you, what was your experience to as a child? Because they're traditionally men are supposed to be a certain way, boys are supposed to be a certain way, and thank God that that's changing and evolving. But what was that like for you growing up? Was your father, I read in your book, what had certain expectations of how boys should be?
Yes. Yes. And he was kinder than most, but he did freak out when I started to follow my own inspiration rather than his footsteps. And it scared him, and he expressed his anger as apathy, and criticism, and kind of just rejected me. And I was out on my own trying to figure out what my life was about, without the that fatherly presence. And I did find a lot of mentors. But way before all of that, I do remember being shamed in school for being feminine, for having feelings, for crying. I remember being bullied, and I remember being labeled a sissy.
Mm,
And so I became a jock. I became very athletic in an attempt, but I enjoyed myself. But there was also this underlying attempt to feel good enough as a boy and then as a man by proving my masculinity, by being competitive and winning and really good at sports.
right. Yeah. I mean, And you know, you said like I believe you said the word scared. It scared your father when you became kind of following your own energy. It's like that uncomfortable. This is not what I'm this is not my comfort zone. So I'm gonna do what I can to like get out of it.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying men would rather channel their fear into anger because anger is a more powerful, I'm in control kind of
Hmm.
experience. But to face fear with vulnerability and just tremble and admit, I feel really scared right now. Most men have been conditioned to not admit fear, naked,
Right.
raw fear. And yet it's one of the keys to having a great life. Adventure, what is
Right.
adventure? It's going towards fear and trembling and breathing and keep moving past fear.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, when you say vulnerability, and when I think of like traditionally, vulnerability would also equal weakness in a very traditional masculine, like this idea culturally of what that's supposed to be. um but you know, I have a son, and you know, he's very athletic, but he's such a lover. He loves to cook. We allow them to follow their energy. Are you seeing that trend of people moving towards just following their natural energy and their authenticity?
Yes. And I also want to use the word bubble because I think you and I both have created bubbles around each
We
other.
have created bubbles, yes.
And it's tempting to project that onto the whole world. But I think actually you'd be accurate to say that masses of people are evolving in a way that they're trading in the rules for following inspiration, following guidance, intuition, whatever words you use. More and more people, there's more permission in the culture for that to happen.
And why do you think that is?
Because if we don't, we're going to die.
Right. We're all gonna
It,
be depressed and sad.
hello, extinction, just around the corner. Maybe a few generations of this is all we got left. So if we don't evolve, um, and when you follow your energy rather than other people's rules, and you actually are taken care of by the universe, and you're led to do things that benefit the earth and benefit other people. No one follows their energy into power trips. You
Mhm.
can't say Trump or Hitler was following their energy. They were not. There are, when you follow your energy wants to bless the world and have fun and create something new and have it be a win-win.
I started my healing journey. I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor. In 2020, I went into a treatment center for my trauma, and, you know, prior to that, I didn't know who I was, right? I was what everyone else kind of told me I was.
Yeah.
And that didn't feel right, but I didn't know anything else. I didn't know any better. But when I started working on myself and healing and looking inward, that's when like everything actually felt authentic. Like I didn't know what authentic was. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm authentic, sure." No, I wasn't. Right? Like I was what someone else told me I needed to be to survive in this world. But I was not. That's the thing. I was surviving. I wasn't thriving. And I feel like once I started looking inward was when I started thriving. Did you feel that you had an experience that brought you to this place where I'm going to be my authentic self?
The experience that turned it all around,
Where you said, I'm going to be
none
my authentic self.
none of the above.
None
It
of the
was
above.
no, there was a long, gradual process. No moments come to mind that were highlights or turning points, but lots of therapy, lots of coaches, lots of healers,
Lots of coaches.
and
Yeah.
lots of feedback. I've lived in community twice in my life, and I've just always been a part of some kind of container where people give each other honest feedback. How am I coming across? Am I coming across authentic? Am I rehearsing? Am I playing a role? And very often I don't know until somebody who cares about me tells me. So
Mhm.
being open and vulnerable to feedback has been an important part of my process.
You know, we talk about like this balance between, you know, feminine and masculine energy. men need to be more masculine, women need to be more feminine, but authentically, is there this balance of energies?
Absolutely. And it's different. For different people, they're more masculine oriented. Different people are more feminine oriented, including those in men's bodies. And in the book, I really kind of I just put it in plain words. There's a left side of the brain. It's the yang, it's the intellect, it's the get things done, it's effort, it's uh, and then there's the right side of the brain, and it's in charge of intuition, receptivity. It's feminine, it's yin, it lets things happen. Yang energy makes things happen. Yin energy lets things happen and praises and appreciates and nurtures life. Masculine energy says, let's put a man on the moon. Feminine energy says, let's clean the earth and feed the children. And can you see that why be one or the other? Like this is the evolution of humanity now, is that we're becoming more balanced between left and right brain. And I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it's, what it looks like, because masculine, feminine ideas are very cultural. So I'd
Mhm.
like to throw them out and just talk about yin, yang, and energy, and one person's authentic energy. Like in my life, there's been times where making it happen was so important, and other times letting it happen was crucial. So it's like there's do and there's be, and I'm not one to say we need one or the other. I'm saying all of us need both yin, yang, and we all, when we find our way, it's going to be different than other people. It's not, everybody is a unique snowflake, and when you find your authentic self-expression, you can't compare yourself with others.
Right.
You always lose when you compare yourself.
Right. It's like when I tell my son, I'm like, when he's like, oh, well, when he wants to compare himself to other people, it's like, why don't you compare to yourself to how you performed yesterday? Or, not what, because it's a losing game. It's a losing game when you're comparing yourself to other
Yes,
people.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah, and I also want to encourage young men and boys to not overly look for their good feelings about themselves by their wins, victories, successes, accomplishments. It sets up this conditional love where I can't feel good about myself unless I'm a winner.
Right. Yeah,
And by my achievements shall I measure my self-esteem, and that's not healthy.
exactly. And so that's very interesting because, like you said, you and I, we live in a bubble where, it all makes sense to us. But let's say, he goes off to college or we move and he is faced with a different community where it is more traditional or how it used to be or how it not evolved, I guess you can say. How do we help our children face that?
They're being thrown into a fire. It's like an initiation. And I think the most important thing we can do is to say, I'm here for you. And if you ever want to talk about what you're going through, I just will listen. I won't give you advice unless you ask for it.
Mhm.
And that's it. And then you let go and do your inner work. As a parent, there's a lot of work to do to detach when your child is going into a very fiery initiation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very difficult thing for especially a parent who is on their own healing journey to, and I think this is where my parents were at one point, like be like everybody else so you feel safer, right? It's like the strength in numbers situation, like but that's
Mhm.
obviously we know that's the wrong idea. Like we need to be, well, not necessarily wrong, but we need to be our own individual selves and
Absolutely. But the need for belonging is a human need. It's not just a
Mhm.
cultural thing. We need both belonging and individual expression. being our own person, but being connected to our tribe. And that,
Yeah.
like, it's not an either or.
Right. Yeah, I feel like if we do look at everything either or, it's also something that is we want to integrate everything. It's a
Yeah.
whole process. Um, so can you talk about some of the important aspects of your book that you believe is important for others to be to be aware of?
I would say every chapter, and there's 50 chapters.
Mhm.
I trimmed a lot of excess meat, fat from that book, and only left with 50 chapters that I think are so important. They're very bite-sized, small chapters. And
Mhm.
but the one that's coming to mind is, it's called The Righteous Man, and it's about men's need, and I would say addiction, to be
Mm.
right, and how they can get through that, and what's on the other side, of what's underneath that,
Right.
and how can women help, and how to deal with the relationship dynamics. Because if anyone in a relationship insists on being right and is holding their point of view so tightly, it's not going to work. So that's a pretty important thing to talk about in relationships, and just in general. Like, why do I need to be right? What would happen if I'm not right?
Oh, that's so interesting because I was actually just thinking about that this morning. I was actually looking inward and thinking, why do I have this need to be right? Why can't I let it go? Because my husband's like, don't worry about it. Who cares? Like, why are you focused on this one thing that doesn't matter to you? Why do you feel this need to be right? And I was actually exploring this a lot this morning, and I come, just sharing, I came to the conclusion because like I was always told I was wrong as a child. I
Yeah.
was always told, and so when I feel very strongly when I'm right, because I still doubt myself a lot, there are times where I'm like, am I right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I'm right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always wrong, so I can't be right. And so when I
Yeah.
feel strongly that I am right, it bothers me to my core. And so, yes, that's something very much that I'm struggling with. Um, because that is very interesting. There are a lot of people in this world who have this need to be right, including myself,
Yeah.
clearly, which I
Yeah.
need to explore a lot more. Mm. Wow.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. For most people, it's about having been shamed in the past, having had feelings and perceptions and opinions invalidated because of
Mhm.
your size, because of your lack of experience, because of your age, because of whatever. And that feeling of I'm bad, I'm wrong, is it's like it's very compressed and it's very small, and nobody wants to go there because it's not fun. It's not, it's not right to have shame.
Mhm.
And so what we do is we try to validate ourselves into feeling better about ourselves by holding tightly to rigid opinions, and I'm right, and underneath that is, well, maybe I'm wrong, and underneath that is original innocence. And that's where we want to get to, because in that land, the field, Rumi's field, beyond all ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That's where we want to be, where it just doesn't matter. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be right, because the truth is there is no such thing as wrong or right.
Mhm.
There's just points of view, and there's as many
Yeah.
points of view as there are people on the planet, and everyone is valid. See, that's the thing I think we're looking for when we insist on being right. I want to feel myself. I'm okay. I'm a valid person. And we can
Mm.
skip the whole being right or wrong thing and go directly down to that level of, okay, part of me is feeling scared that there's something wrong with me. And I just want to reassure and remind myself that I am valid and my opinions matter. And it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. It's just that I have a voice and I love expressing myself. And I don't need everyone to agree with me in order to feel the joy of expressing my opinion. And I don't have to be right about my opinion.
Right.
This is more of an art than a science.
Yeah. And I feel like that comes with healing, right? Like, that is the once you feel safety within yourself, you don't need to be validated by anyone else.
Absolutely.
Ugh.
It's nice. It's a gift. It's fun. I'll take some of that, but I don't need it.
Right, right.
You
Oh,
know,
healing.
it's so interesting to me. I don't know why this is coming to my mind, but I trust that whatever comes to my mind is usually appropriate. I've done a lot of conferences with my music and ran into Deepak Chopra a few times, and I've watched him get into fights, on TV and, like not fights, but verbal
Argument. Yeah.
heated
Mhm.
discussions. Usually, like it's him like and a scientist or a doctor or somebody more traditional, and he's trying to convince them that there's a god or anything. And I've watched him do that. I'm hoping that he's over it, but I watched him do it, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like, this man in the public eye, who stands for love, light, and joy and peace, is is so attached to his opinions and so wanting to convince the other person that they're wrong. And it's like, it's part of it is medical training. My father was a doctor, and I think doctors are, to life and death situation, they have to be right, and they have to convince themselves that they're right.
Mm, that is fascinating. Yeah, and you would think someone like Deepak Chopra would be more open to different points of view and maybe say, that's your opinion,
Yeah.
and this is my opinion.
Yeah, and just let people be where they're at, like atheist or science, if they have the scientific model and it works for them, so be it. Like,
Mhm.
but he seems to want to be a spokesperson for, on a crusade to show everybody that there's more than just science and Western medicine, and that's fine. Maybe
Mhm.
that's his flow. I don't like
Right.
crusading against anything. I'm not
Oh,
a
no.
crusader for mindful masculinity. I'm not a crusader against toxic anything. Like, I just
Mhm. Well, you did you brought up shame a lot because I feel like
yes.
shame is a very, very strong emotion, very compelling part if you do parts work or, internal family systems therapy, which I do, and shame comes up a lot. And shame really, um, really, it can be very difficult to deal with shame. What are your thoughts of shame? Because you do bring it up a lot, and especially when you talk about your childhood and the shame that you felt.
Yes. Well, it's a difficult emotion because most of us are ashamed of our shame. And yeah, it's I don't even know if it's an emotion, because it's not like when you're sad, you get to cry to release it.
Right.
When you're angry, you may pound pillows and jump up and down and use your voice to release the energy. When you're afraid, you tremble. But when you're ashamed, it's almost like there's no emotion. It's just like you become invisible and you get smaller and smaller in your
Mm,
energy. And there's not a lot of breath, there's not a lot of emotion, feelings. And so I would call shame a state, a mental state of something's wrong with me. And I must hide from the world and hide from myself and just crawl up into a little roly poly bug and protect myself. And it's more of a mental state. And of course, I work with clients with shame. And because I'm so good at noticing my own shame and being vocal
right.
about it and confessing, hey, I feel ashamed, I feel embarrassed, I feel guilty. Like, as soon as I touch on any shame, guilt, or embarrassment, I try to get an audience. I want somebody to hear me, because there is something inherently healing in confession. When shame is like this little anaerobic bacteria that thrives in the dark, and
Mhm.
shedding light upon it, like the 12 steps would say, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Right.
And it heals shame to reveal it. Oh, so I just let my peeps know that I'm going to every once in a while tell them about shame, and please don't try to fix me. because just in the vocalizing of it, does it lose its power?
Absolutely. And I think this is, this is kind of why I started the podcast is people share their stories because I realize the power of sharing my story and becoming vulnerable and talking about the abuse, the childhood sexual abuse that I had suffered by the hands of my father. And that I mean, I thought I was just gonna go to my grave, like, I will not breathe a word of this, but it was slowly killing me, literally. I had, it was multiple suicide attempts to, because
Mm,
I felt trapped in this secret, um, I never talked to it with doctors or therapists. They diagnosed me bipolar. Um, and then, but once it all came out, it was like, oh, you have PTSD. And once I was able to actually, it took a lot for me to actually say the words because there was so much shame there. Like, am I the only person like with that was dealing with this? Oh, it was just it was so difficult, but then once I said the words out loud, that changed everything. That was when I was like, "Okay." I told my husband, and then I told my therapist, and then I went into treatment, I told it in a group, and then other people started sharing their abuse, and I was like, wow, this is really powerful. And this is kind of why the podcast was birthed from that. It's just
nice.
sharing that shame that didn't feel shameful anymore.
That the word shameless is actually used to criticize people. Like,
Yeah.
have you no shame? Have you no shame? And what if you just said, absolutely not. I have no more shame. What's
Ugh,
it to you?
what a beautiful world this would be.
Indeed. But people think that if I don't have shame, that I'm going to hurt other people more, that I'm going to not be a good participating member of society, that shame keeps us on our good behavior. And nothing can be further than like if there's no shame, then you're a psychopath and you don't feel anybody's feelings. That's the
Mhm.
fear.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then that fear kind of translates into anger, at least for me. And then I was an angry person before I actually shared my shame
Mm,
when I became shameless. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't have any
mm,
shame, but I
mhm,
definitely have much less shame than I did prior to treatment and my healing. And I'm telling you, it's a very heavy feeling. It's a very heavy
mhm,
feeling that weighed me down, and
mhm,
would have these outbursts. So I
mhm.
think you're right. If this was a shameless world, I feel like a lot of people would be a lot happier and a lot more peaceful.
Hey, can I riff off of that? Do a little rap?
Oh, I'd love that. Go for it.
Wow, a shameless world. Would we all walk around with narcissistic tendencies? Or would we become free to write our own poetry? Would we treat each other with kindness or blindness in a shameless world? We'll find out sooner or later, but don't be a shame procrastinator. Right now, acknowledge that you have shame and let it come up and call it by its name. It's not who you are and it's not the bottom line. It's like a little devil roaming around in your mind and it drives you to drink whiskey and wine and become a workaholic and not have free time. So let's shine a light on that shame thing and start to let it release and sing. And you'll find that you'll spread your angel wings, and being shame free will bring the world so much more joy. That's how I'm
Oh,
employed. I'm a shame buster. Who are you going to call? Shame busters.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Wow. That was amazing. Is
Yeah.
that just something that came off at the top of your head?
I do that.
I
Yes,
love
both in
that.
song and in rap and in poetry. It's like I
Mm.
become stream of consciousness, and starting out is takes a little effort, and then I get into the stream, and boom, like things come out of my mouth that shock me and delight me.
So you are a singer-songwriter, and as we just noticed how you just riffed from a conversation, could you summarize in a song what our conversation was about?
Okay, Lorilee, I'll do it. And I want you to give me the first sentence of this song.
I give you the first sentence in the
Yes,
song.
that's your job. Just whatever it is, I'll work with it.
Ah, n sometimes I think I'm creative, but right now I'm not feeling so.
That's fine. In
Okay.
fact, that could be the first line in the song.
What
You,
did I just say?
I get the sentiment of it. I get the sentiment of it, and I'll start with that.
Okay.
Scott, stop putting me on the spot. I don't want to be in that role. Well, back to me, Lorilee. I respect your feelings, and I'm gonna sing this song. And may it be a healing for our collective shame. The fig leaf that was put on in the garden a long time ago. We decided to not let our true selves show, but we are letting go of that. Letting go of that shameful crap. The Puritans were a little tight, and we are letting in the light in our bubble in Washington, D.C. I think there's so much trouble there, but I didn't know there was Lorilee. Many people in your bubble don't do politics. They'd rather focus on personal growth and learning through relationships. You're a trauma survivor and now a thriver, helping folks along the way, showing your vulnerability so they know that they're okay. Let us all know we are okay.
I love it. I can't believe you just did that. That's amazing.
Hmm.
Oh, well, before we go,
Shameless plug. I do that for birthdays, any occasion, no occasion, as a gift. So people hire me to commission to create a song for somebody they love. So you could look on my website about that. It's called a song portrait, and I live on scottsongs.com.
awesome. And you can find that in the show notes.
Oh, good.
I'll put all of his information and also where you could get his book.
Yes,
Oh,
the
well.
Amazon rainforest.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Mm. Well, I would like to address those who are trauma survivors, and I'm sure this point has been made in different ways by a variety of people on this podcast. But as cruel and tragic as it is to have experienced those experiences, it does shape your character in such a way that you grow up wanting to be compassionate, wanting to right certain wrongs and stand for justice. And it's almost as like your heart had to break before it could break open and find your calling. So
Mm.
all of these experiences that we've survived helps us thrive, and serving others who've been in your position is probably the best medicine for going from surviving to thriving.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast today.
It's been fun. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, that was Scott Grace, author of Mindful Masculinity. To purchase his book, please go to the show notes and you'll find a link there as well as to his personal website. October's issue of Authentic Insider is out. Check out Authentic Insider at traumasurvivorthriver.com. That's traumasurvivorthriver.com, as well as past episodes of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my email list to get Authentic Insider magazine in your inbox monthly. Join us next week when I speak with author Lane Savant when we talk about intuitive food therapy. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. Take care.